Namaste. We will be presenting Bharatanatyam, which is one of the oldest of all classical dances in India. The first item we are presenting is a Ganesha Stuti. In that, it says, I bow to you, Ganesha, who is the elephant-headed god, who is the most compassionate, who is praised by the gods and the sages, who likes to eat the modak, who is the son of goddess Parvati. And without the first god, without his blessings, even Brahma and Vishnu cannot do their duties. The dancers are Megha George, Tanusha Bommakanti, Ishita Srikantan, and myself, Lisa Joseph.
Shuklam Bharadaram Vishnum Shashivarnam Chaturbhujam Prasanna-vadanam Dhyayet Sarva Vighnopashantaye Shri Ganesha Charanam Gajanana Shri Ganesha Charanam Gajanana Shri Ganesha Charanam Gajanana Shri Ganesha Charanam Gajanana Devar Munivar Paniyum Dayakara Shri Ganesha Charanam Gajanana Devar Munivar Paniyum Dayakara Shri Ganesha நாகாபரணனை நான் மறை போற்றும் நாகாபரணனை நான் மறை போற்றும் நாகாபரணனை நான் மறை போற்றும் நாமனே பிரணவ ரூபனே ஜய ஜய நாமனே பிரணவ ரூபனே ஜய 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 ஸ்ரீ கணேஷா சரணம் கஜானன தேவர் முனிவர் பணியும் தயாகரா ஸ்ரீ கணேஷா ஹரி ஹரி பாதம் நம்பும் ராமதாச வரதனே பாதம் நம்பும் ராமதாச வரதனே பாதம் நம்பும் ராமதாச வரதனே மோதக பிரியனே கௌரி சுதனே மோதக பிரியனே கௌரி சுதனே ஆதிதேவன் உன் அருளிலை என்றால் ஆதிதேவன் உன் அருளிலை என்றால் வேதனும் மாலும் செய்தொழில் உண்டோ வேதனும் மாலும் செய்தொழில் உண்டோ வேதனும் ஆலும் செய்தொழில் உண்டோ ஸ்ரீ கணேசா சரணம் சரணம் கஜானன தேவர் முனீவர் பணியுந்தயாகரா ஸ்ரீ கணேசா ஸ்ரீ கணேசா சரணம் 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 ஹரி.
Namaskaram. I am the instructor for the ancient Indian classical dance form Bharatanatyam. I will be addressing few frequently asked questions. What is Bharatanatyam? As the name suggests, Bha-bhavam, Ra-ragham, Ta-thalam, Natyam dance. Bharatanatyam is a dance form that encompasses music, rhythm, and emotions. This is a communication tool that is used to spread the ethical and the moral values which are embedded in the ancient Asian Indian scriptures through storytelling. That is why this is popularly acclaimed as an art of storytelling. The next question is, how long does it take to master this art form? Research says it takes 10,000 hours of practice to become good at any skill. To speed up the learning time, you can always get the help of a professional teacher. You can simply follow the 5-hour rule. The 5-hour rule is a simple concept which involves setting aside 5 hours a week, 1 hour each working day dedicated to practice or learning. So, 10,000 hours of work would be around 20 hours per week for 10 years. The math being said, when you enroll your child when he or she is 6 or 7 years old, they will first get to know the art form and then grow along with it and develop interest towards the art form. Is there any similarity between Bharatanatyam and yoga? Both Bharatanatyam and yoga are wonderful art forms that form the bedrock of the Indian culture. Bharatanatyam, very similar to yoga, demands conscious understanding of the mind, body, and emotions. But I would perhaps define Bharatanatyam as a fast-paced yoga. There are some similarities in the postures. Example, the Natya Karnas. What is the age limit to start learning the dance form? Research says that the most conducive age to begin serious training is around 7 to 9. Prior to that, children should be acquiring movement and coordination skills in their age-appropriate activities. Bharatanatyam definitely fosters flexibility, range of motion, physical strength, and stamina. The repetitive movements involved in the dance can help improve muscle tone, correct poor posture, increase balance and coordination, and improve the overall cardiovascular health. What are the different styles in Bharatanatyam and which style will I be teaching here? To name a few prominent styles are Tanjore, Melathur, Kalakshetra, Vaduvur, Pandanallur. Each style has its own sequence of basic steps and its way of presenting the bhava, raga, and thala. I will be dealing with the Tanjore style. The Tanjore style describes the practice of dance in the Tanjore royal court propagated by the Tanjore Natavanar family, who are the descendants of the Tanjore quartet. The Tanjore quartet were 4 brothers who worked in the early 19th century at the Tanjore royal court as musicians and dance composers. They created the current structure of the margam, which is used by all styles of Bharatanatyam. Both the Pandanallur and the Tanjore styles are still maintaining some of the oldest compositions in Bharatanatyam in their repertoires. Bharatanatyam, as it is known today, springs from Sadharnatyam, also known by the names Dasiyatam, Chinnamelam, or simply Sadar. The term Sadar began with the Maratha rulers of South India in the 17th century, who called the dance Sadar Nach. This corresponds to the presentation of the dance in the courts. A more exalted role of the dance is evoked by the name Dasi Atam, the dance of Devadasis, as a part of temple worship. Devadasi, whose name means servant, that is Dasi, of divinity, Deva, was an artist dedicated to the service of a temple. The dance of Devadasis was integral to the ritual worship. Devadasi families specialized in the arts of music and dance, and with Natyavanars, who were the dance masters, they maintained the tradition from generation to generation, supported by the royal patronage. Let's get into the story behind the evolution of Bharatanatyam. The theoretical base of this dance form, which is referred as Sadar, trace back to the ancient Indian theatrologist and musicologist Bharata Muni's Sanskrit Hindu text on the performing arts called Natya Shastra. The text's first complete version was presumably completed between 200 BC to 200 CE. However, such time frame actually varies. According to legends, Lord Brahma revealed Bharatanatyam to sage Bharata, who then encoded this holy dance form in Natya Shastra. The text that consists of thousands of verses structured in different chapters divides the dance into two specific forms. One is Nritta, which is the pure dance comprising of the hand movements and gestures, and the other is Nritya, which is the solo expressive dance that comprises of expressions. According to the Russian scholar Natalia Lidova, Natya Shastra elucidates several theories of Indian classical dances, including that of Tandava dance, standing postures, basic steps, bhava, rasa, methods of acting, and gestures. One of the five great epics of Tamil literature, Silappatikaram, has a direct reference to this dance form. The Shiva temple of Kanchipuram, that is decorated with carvings dating back to almost 6th and 9th centuries, manifests the development of this dance form by around the mid-1st millennium. Many ancient Hindu temples are embellished with sculptures of Lord Shiva in Bharatanatyam dance poses. For illustration, the eastern Gopuram of the 12th century Thillai Natarajar temple, located at Chidambaram of Tamil Nadu, dedicated to Lord Shiva, bears sculptures depicting 108 poses of Bharatanatyam, which are referred as Karanas in Natya Shastra. These are intricately carved in small rectangular panels. Another notable sculpture can be seen in the cave of Karnataka's Badami cave temples dating back to the 7th century, where a 5 feet tall sculpture of Lord Shiva is depicted as Nataraja doing a Tandava dance. The 18 arms of Shiva sculpture expresses mudras or hand gestures, which are an integral part of Bharatanatyam. The 18th century saw the emergence of rule of the East India Company, followed by setting up of British colonial rule in the 19th century. Such developments saw decline of various classical dance forms, which were subjected to contemptuous fun and discouragement, including Bharatanatyam, that through the 19th century remained exclusive to Hindu temples. Eventually, social and economic conditions associated with the Devadasi culture, added with the contempt and despicable attitude from the British officials who held the Devadasis of South India and the Nachkals of North India, and they disgraced such systems. Furthermore, there was an anti-dance movement in 1892 to stop such practice. The Madras Presidency, under the British colonial government, banned the custom of dancing in Hindu temples in 1910, and with this age-old tradition of performing Bharatanatyam in Hindu temples also came to an end.
You said that the Maratha kings called it Sadar Nach. Okay, so Sadar. So what does the word Sadar mean?
Sadar actually represents the dance form.
Okay.
It was not called Bharatanatyam at earlier times. It was the term Bharatanatyam was not given to it. It was actually called a Sadar Natyam. Sadar is the name of the dance form. And
Right.
then later, with evolution, they gave the name Bharatanatyam to this dance form after the revival, after which initially it was not for the elated group. Nobody practiced this art form. Only the people from the Natavanar family or people who served the temple, they were allowed to practice this art form. So this was not well established, or I would say well popularized among the common people. And elated crowd most probably saw that as a disgrace if they practiced it. So they did not practice it. So only after that revolution, after the colonial rule and after the British rule went away, after the impact of the Greek theaters, then a revolution came and people started becoming more open to accepting this art form, that everybody can practice this as an art form. And it was that time when, and there were legendary artists who really worked for popularizing this art form as well.
Um, because there are a lot of non-Indians in the audience, if you could explain the word Nach, because it was called Sadar Nach. Now, the Indians would know the meaning of the word Nach, but if you could explain the word Nach to the non-Indians in the audience.
Okay, it was just a movement. The Southern Nach was more of a movement where what they did was they after the British conquered India, these part of people, they were said to be really wealthy because they had a lot of association with the temple, and they could use the resources in the temple, and they had a lot of wealth, and the British people wanted to take the wealth away from them, and they want to put an end to it, because what these other people did was, in the form of enacting, right, they also did some theater arts or some dance that would degrade, that would support Indian freedom and degrade the British rule. The British rulers did not like that, and obviously they're not going to like that because they wanted to conquer India. At one point, when you are voicing out against them, they want to suppress this community. That is when the Southern Notch movement started of suppressing them. They did put them in the jail. They gave them punishments in order to stop them voicing against the rulers.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that, since there are a lot of, again, non-Indians in the audience, Nach means dance in Hindi and northern languages. So I guess when they said Sadar Nach, they meant Sadar dance, the word Nach itself means dance. So why did one of the things you were talking was about the British is which is not in this lecture, is that they passed this section 25 under which all temples were controlled by the British, and they took over
Yeah.
all the money. So once they took over all the money, they, they kind of controlled the temples totally, which means they wiped out Indian dance from the temples. So that was, that's the political side of the evolution of the dance. Now, what about the word natyam? Because nach is mostly used by North Indians. So the word natyam, what does it mean, and when did it come to be attached to this?
Natyam is not a North Indian word. Natyam is a Samaskrita word.
No, no,
Natyam,
no. Nach is a Hindi word.
yeah,
Nach, Southern Nach.
I'm talking about Natyam. Natyam is a
Correct.
Sanskrit terminology, which means drama
Right.
or dance.
Right. Right. So yeah, anybody else has any questions? Because I can keep asking forever.
Well, I am very interested in when the temples were taken over by the British, did the people who were sort of expelled from their art form officially, did they keep it alive in their homes? I would think that they did in secret, because that would be a form of rebellion and resistance.
Right, they did do that because they didn't want the art form to die. If you see this as an art form, they definitely did not want the art form to die. So they kept passing it on to their descendants,
Exactly.
and they did do it as in a secretive place. And obviously, when they were about to perform these, initially this dance form had repertoires praising only deities, which means when there is a procession in a temple, I'm not sure how many of you would have seen a parade or kind of a procession from a temple. It happens in Brahmotsar time. They carry the Lord or the deity on their shoulders and they walk around the streets. So when there is such kind of procession, this Sadar dancers would come and they would dance in praise of Lord, whatever Lord, in appreciation of the Lord. That was what this dance was all about initially. But when all this invasion happened, the dance forms slowly transformed and they started voicing their opinions as well, which is highly relevant to today's art world because most of the dancers, contemporary as well as classical dancers, are trying to voice their opinion, are also social activists, and they every single artist feels that they are a part of community and they have to voice their opinion against what is happening, or they also have to include culture and art in conversing with the community. That is exactly what happened when they voiced against the British emperors. They created movements, something like that, and that is when those dance forms also emerged. I would call it contemporary at that time, and definitely it was not encouraged. The British rulers tried to suppress them, and they did undergo a very um, bad experience, I would say. And then again revolution happened, and they passed on to their descendants, and somehow the dance form was preserved.
So, you know how there's Navratri, and this is social and religious. And I just wanted to know, did the British also say, okay, in your public celebrations, in your family and community celebrations, you also weren't allowed to dance?
No, it was never like that. That's exactly the point. It was more like, as far as I know, it was more, if you are going to do it in a religious aspect, they would have probably not turned against them this much. But just because it was more than that, they used this dance form to preach freedom as well. So that is when they wanted to stop everything. That includes religious, because they wanted to stop it they want to put an end to it because they didn't want to encourage this going on.
Very good, thank you.
Um, Question: was it ever taught in the gurukuls, or what is traditional Hindu schools? Was this dance ever taught in the gurukuls?
Yes, this dance form was learned only as a system um, in Gurukulam, which means the students will go and reside with the teacher and will serve the teacher. That was how art form was passed in those days. After serving the teacher teaches the art form. That is how it was. If that is what you're asking, did I understand the question correctly? Hello.
I think her question was just, how was this art form taught? What were the schools like? Was that the question?
If that was the question, yes, it was taught in a Gurukulam pattern where the students went to the house of the teachers and the teachers taught to the students. I think.
I have a question actually. So in the North Indian style, right, there has been a very big influence during the Muslim rule. Has there been any such influence in the Bharatanatyam, or was it completely isolated?
No, I don't think the North Indian and the South Indian dance forms were, I don't know, they were kind of separated. This has more an impact from the literature, from the Sanskrit literature, I would say, rather than the rulers or the emperors or the invaders. So I would perhaps say that this dance form was not influenced to a great extent by the invaders, because that is because of the complexity of the literature associated with it. Because in order to influence the dance form, you have to know the literature well, and this is strongly the constitution or the context is based on the literature, so it is very hard to influence this.
Was the study of classical dance part of, um, you know, a young woman's or a young girl's preparation for married life and community life? Like, was that something that families might ask about?
Actually, they're asking about that today in today's world, but in yesterday's world, if they encouraged singing, but they never encouraged dancing, I would say.
Oh,
If girls are dancers, probably they might not. It might not be easy to get her married.
oh,
Uh, that at least till a certain point of time, they did not see this dance form as an art form. They saw that as something that people who served the temple, because in those days, the Devadasis who served the temple also served the court, the kings, and the local municipal rulers. So it was not looked upon with grace. Those ladies were looked with disgrace, which is wrong, which was not to be encouraged. But unfortunately, since they practiced this dance form, people never looked this dance form as an art. They rather associated this art form with some culture, and they felt that people who are practicing this art form uh, will not be pure or something. So it was very hard in the community to get this dance form propagated only as an art form and not something else.
wow.
I have a question because obviously I'm not non-Indian, so I don't have um, much about Indian dance, and I know there are many other forms. So I need a super basic input. So there are many. I know at least I know there are many like different kind of dances forms. Are they really different? Like let's say if I see the performances, that I wouldn't know which styles, and like let's say you talk about south and north, and
We're
like
talking about
where
the
they
style.
derive, and it's like each forms are very different, and also like very telling different stories, or like
Can I understand your question right? Are you talking about the styles within Bharatanatyam or styles within like Kathak, Bharatanatyam, different dance forms, Odissi, like that?
right. I'm talking about more major Indian. When we
Oh,
say, because I'm not Indian, so when I
right.
say Indian dance, it's like okay. I need more general.
This is a more of a communication tool in India, I would say. See, they just that's exactly what I say. This art form is based on literature, be it Kathak, be it Bharatanatyam. Everybody, for example, in Kathak they do a Kana, Lord Krishna like this. In Bharatanatyam we do it like this, like this. That is all the difference, but they communicate something. It's an art of storytelling. Basically, all the dance forms that you see classical dance forms, not the folk. Folk has its own literature, its own way of expression, because it's more of a community engagement dance forms, all the folk dance forms. But these classical dance forms, they just tell you the literature, the moral values behind the literature. The reason being, if I start talking about Bhagavad Gita or Ramayana or whatever the literature be it, or the quintessence of the literature, it is not going to be interesting for you to listen to that, to listen to the quintessence directly. In order to get to the people in a entertaining way, these dance forms were evolved, because you cannot talk to a kid about the philosophies of life, but moral values are the same. There are do's and there are don'ts. So in order to lecture everybody, in order to get it as a part and parcel of your life, these dance forms were evolved more like an more in an entertaining way, but still adhering the moral values, or if that makes sense.
It does make sense. Is that why the torso is generally held very upright? It seems like most of the movement is taking place in hands, feet, legs, and facial expression. I don't really see much movement of the torso.
Yes, yes. And you may there are many questions about the costumes. Why do you wear grand costumes? The reason would be, in those days when the dancers do it on the stage, there won't be much lighting, or you don't have all those facility or the technical aspects in those days. So in order for the facial expressions to reach the last person in the audience, they wear all those makeup in order
Oh,
to enlighten, in order to get it like more. In Greek theater they wear masks, so masks are easier way of communication. If they put on one mask, you know that okay, he's the villain or he's the hero of the character. But how do you express it in a dance form? And
right,
especially if it is more of a, at least if it is a dialogue, you can wear different costumes. If it is more of a ekaharya, which means a one-man show where one woman is depicting different characters, it's very difficult. So in order to enhance that, this kind of costumes and makeup evolved to support.
right.
Um, Also, I guess if people are not literate or educated, they may not be able to read Ramayana, Mahabharata themselves. So
Correct.
I guess by having a dance form, you tell the story even to the most uneducated people, and they understand it, without having to read a book if they didn't know how to read.
Absolutely, that was the intent of it.
Okay, I have a question. My question is, I guess I came in maybe 10 minutes after you began, and I was trying to taking notes, but I understand that a lot of the dance was a reaction. It was both religious and a reaction to the political situation. But I guess in the beginning, maybe in the very beginning, you said goes back 200 to 200 BC. It was it devotional, mainly devotional.
You will actually read about the actual dance form in the next session, but I will give you a glimpse of it. So there is a story behind how this dance form evolved, but you don't have to believe the story. It can be a mythological story. But what we can believe from the story is that this dance form was evolved to preach the moral values behind the literature. That, and you can call it Lord Ganesha or Lord Vishnu or Lord Shiva. Whatever they preach is the do's and don'ts in life. That's exactly what they preach. So this dance form is more an entertaining way. And when you talk to a kid about Lord Ganesha, probably she or he might not listen. But when you say that the elephant has big ears, a nice big trunk and tell it like a story, the kid might have some develop some interest to listen to the literature. That is how all this has been framed.
Thank you.
That is the reason why they do it on in the praise of those all those lords. So it becomes a spectacle to view or to envision. The visuals become good and thereby you get attracted to it. But when you are drawn into the art form, ultimately what it tells you is the way of life, more like yoga. It's not just the asanas, it's not just the postures that you're doing. When you really get into yoga and then you slowly not only you don't want to do asanas, but you also want to get healthy. You start eating something healthy, and then you start coming into a regular routine and into a healthy life cycle. You started getting adapted to it, and you start liking meditation. It's more about having a peaceful, happy life. That's the way of life.
Mhm. Very nice.
Was there a practice for boys to also do some type of dance? Some type of religious focused dance?
Absolutely. This was invented by a male dancer. So, the one who invented yoga. So, this is done by a male dancer, and then it got passed on to the females. But aesthetically, it looks more beautiful when a female dances. And I wouldn't think that is the only reason. The main reason is the artists are not supported properly now. Not only nowadays, even in the yester years, they are not paid properly. And most of the male, they are seen as breadwinners of the family, or they have to go get income for the family. And when they keep practicing the art form, it wouldn't be sufficient to raise a family. That is the reason why we don't see a lot of male dancers, even though they might be interested.
Right.
Yeah, Japan is the same way. The men are not so encouraged to
Yeah.
dance. It doesn't mean that the men don't like dancing. My father liked dancing, but it's just that they don't go to the class. I mean, that's not something
They
that.
don't have enough time or enough
Yeah.
funds.
Whereas I think like the Russians, some of the European country they dance like a ballroom, and so they will learn together.
Yeah.
There's a
I,
little cultural differences.
Layla, since you do mention the European tradition of dance, I just wanted to say that, probably 300 or 400 years ago, this idea of elegance, basically, which is, physical efficiency and strength, that was always seen as part of being in a higher class, maybe a noble or aristocratic
Radical art.
standing. And I wonder if, I mean, we haven't really mentioned that in any way in the context of Bharatanatyam, because in Europe, that really was one of the major reasons to get dance training, to appear to be elevated in some way. And that physical grace was part of it.
The problem is, I would probably relate it the other way in South India. Since this was associated to the southern group of people, it was not looked up, it was looked down with disgrace. But now, what has happened is after people started accepting this as an art form, now this is very expensive to learn, and
Yes,
now it is becoming only possible for the aristocratic people or the elite upper middle class people who can afford
yes,
to learn the art form, and it is not accessible to the other part of the group. But it's very unfair. It's becoming the reverse of it right now. Things have to get with the technology. I think it is possible that it should be accessible to everyone. And I wonder that people really know about yoga, but they don't know about this dance form much, because yoga is not a fast paced workout. If people are into a fitness regime, this would be a very good alternative for them, because it involves a lot of anaerobic movement,
yeah,
where and a good cardio workout. So
absolutely.
so yeah, it's just that it has been branded, in event studies, branding is a very important and a significant thing. It has just been branded or marketed in that way,
Yes.
in a more traditional way. But I don't see this as only a traditional. I see the rich literature behind it, which is very good, which is what has been the bedrock for this dance form. And there is more to it in the scientific front as well, which has not been explored.
So if we could talk a little bit about, I would like to hear what you have to think, what you have to say about strength in women in India, maybe say in the past and in the present, because a lot of, for even folk dance, a lot of folk dance, at least in the European tradition, it's not only about stress relief and community coming together, but it's sort of a means of showing the other people how strong you are, male and female, because until very recently, those societies were agrarian, and a lot of families wanted strong women marrying into their families so they could work. And so I wonder, like, what's the place of physical strength in women in India, past and present? Because for Bharatanatyam, you have to be super strong to perform it beautifully.
Yeah, the physical strength, I would directly relate it to your eating habits and your lifestyle habits. And if you eat properly and if you rest properly, automatically you have that physical strength. This is more of a workout, as I mentioned. So if you see this as a workout and you have a good intake of food, you will obviously have a good physique to carry not only this dance form but also in your regular lifestyles. I've seen so many people struggling in their 30s even to sit down and get up,
Yeah.
stuff like that. If you want to get rid of it, I think this dance form is one of the very good alternative exercise that you can practice to get your muscles tuned and get a good muscle memory, not only muscle memory, good uh, flexibility.
Yes.
You know.
Thank you.
All
Yeah, a
right.
lot of people don't realize dance as a very disciplinary, and then also, um,
Right.
yeah, it's good for mental and so if you study that together, that you, I mean, when you somebody likes dancing, you hear the music and you start reacting, but then when you're young, it's okay, but later on in the older age, you're gonna have a lot of problems, and that's the time that people start thinking about the health. And but I think it's good that you can combine this, because as a dancer you have to know your, yeah,
Absolutely, you're
what
right.
you're working with and things like that. Yeah.
All right, then. See you all next week, and we can continue the discussion. Looking forward for that.
Thank
Are
you.
you going to teach any of the movements?
I'm sorry, Laila.
Going to teach any of the movements?
Next week, I'll be teaching the movements. All right.
We'll be practicing. Just kidding.
We have
We'll get warmed up.
Right.
Oh, it was very interesting.
Yeah, very nice to meet you all as well. Thank you.
Nice
Thank
to
you.
Thank
meet
you
you.
so much.
Thank
Wonderful.
you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. See you next week.
Bye, everyone.
I started Bharatanatyam when I was 2.5 or 3 years old. The reason for me to start that early is because I come from a family of artists where their primary occupation was just arts. My uncle was a percussionist. My grandmother was a professional Bharatanatyam dancer and a teacher. And all my aunts were doing only Kuchipudi Bharatanatyam, and so does my mother. So I spent most of my childhood in the green rooms. I still have reminiscence of talking and playing with all her students in the green room and learning so much from them. It was a pleasure for me to have that learning when I did not even realize that I was learning all the time. That's how I was introduced into the art form. And eventually, I got really passionate and interested about the art form because um,
I was lucky enough to have spent 7 to 8 years in the art form without myself knowing that I'm being involved in the art form so for such a long period. And that eventually kindled my interest and passion towards the art form. Actually, it was the reverse. I always wanted to do only this. And I think that's because my family really knew how hard it would be if you just take up arts as your just for your bread and butter. So they encouraged me to study more and practice dance forms and music whenever I have time. It was the vice versa. I was always interested in all these mythological stories, dancing, and the literature. So I personally did not feel that. And neither did I have any, those days it was not digital, it was not a digital world. We did not have a lot of, entertaining stuff for the kids. And all I had was to just go hang out with my mom's students, play with them. And that is why I always encourage in-person classes, because one way or the other, the students get connected to each other, and without knowing themselves, they start getting involved. They start forming their own network, their own friend circle, and that actually drives them more into the art form rather than being forced into the art form. I'll be very honest here. I never realized it at all. 31 years, I would say. I'm 30. I'm 31 now, and only last year I really decided that I wanted to pursue this as a full-time career. Until that, just like anyone else, I was just juggling between, taking up being a biologist, taking up science as my full-time profession, and doing this part-time, because I think that most of the artists really suffer from the fact that we don't get a bi-weekly income just like the regular office goers or just like other professionals do. And artists do put enough work in whatever they do. They cannot just be artists, performing artists or teachers. They have to be the program manager, the event manager. They have to have develop their own website. They have to start knowing to handle taxes, accounts. They have to be an entrepreneur, as well as they have to keep creating their own artwork. So it's a very difficult profession. And I never thought that I would want to do this full time, unless I really understood what my passion is, and I finally decided that I want my career and passion to be the same. So it's a very difficult decision. It was not an easy decision. So just as I mentioned, it's very difficult being an artist then and now. So my next interest was understanding the anatomy of the human body, science, neuroscience especially. So I did my undergraduate, just like most of the 90s kids. I picked up engineering. I just knew two things existed. One is medicine and the other one is engineering. I truly did not search a lot at that time. So I just had these two options. I did very well in my school. So I picked up industrial biotechnology as my undergraduate, and I was really interested in molecular biology. So I came here to do my master's, and I took up neuroscience also as my minor, and I did do cell molecular biology and neuroscience. The fact that I got married and then I settled, myself and my husband, I had a chance to choose what I really wanted to do. And at that time, I really did not want to continue something that I could have done well, but I really wanted to continue what my passion was. And I believed that having a career that is your that is your passion, is not what many people gets. When you turn 40 or 50, you try to do what you really want to do. But when I had a chance earlier in my life, I really wanted to use that opportunity and start doing what I'm really passionate about. It was my mom's institute. I joined her when I was 15 years old. I joined her as an assistant trainer. And that's when I started experimenting. See, this choreography is a very big term. I usually believe that you start experimenting with the repertoires from the various performances that you see or that you're exposed to. So I did have the opportunity of attending most of the December festivals, and I've attended almost all major festivals there. And I had the opportunities to understand and to see the performances of the senior dancers. That actually helped me learn the repertoires and the nuances more, and also experiment with my own works. That's when I started choreographing for my mother's students. That was my first attempt of helping her in Arangetram. Yes, I did start teaching students at the age of 15. If you decide to study or to understand any art form, I would definitely suggest, this is no big advice, but I would definitely suggest them to at least put 1,000 to 2,000 hours of their work to understand what the art form is. A minimum of 5 years will be required to understand anything for that matter. It can be sports, or it can be an art form, or any other creative work. So do not quit before that. Understand what the art form is, and then you can decide if you really want to continue. And I see many people getting saturated with the basics. Most of them don't take fundamentals very seriously. We always want to move on very fast. I don't believe in shortcuts. I don't believe in fast-paced learning. So I believe in getting the fundamentals strong and putting in more time towards the basics and the fundamentals. I would do the reverse, because I think that many people get interested only after they learn the art form as the art form itself, and then eventually they get interested in the theory and they start reading more by themselves. I would encourage that. Yes, I did learn Kuchipudi to an extent, and I don't master Kuchipudi, but I did learn Kuchipudi, and I'm still learning Carnatic music, South Indian Carnatic music, and I have learned Veena.
Are you studying vocals or instrumental?
I'm doing my vocal now. I'm still continuing my vocal now. I did practice Veena, Saraswathi Veena.
It says, like today, always protect me, the most lovable one, Krishna. Like you protected Draupadi from Dushasana trying to disrobe her and giving her unending clothes. One time you came out from the pillar as Narasimha and protected the boy Prahlada. Another time you protected the Gajendra, the elephant, from the crocodile by killing it. Intropol in Raga Saraswati.
இன்று போல் என்றும் என்னை நீ காத்திடல் வேண்டும். இன்று போல் என்றும் என்னை நீ